An isolation tank, also called a sensory deprivation tank, is a lightless, soundproof tank filled with salt water at skin temperature in which people float. It was first designed for studies on sensory deprivation, which is the deliberate reduction or removal of stimuli from one or all of the human senses. Simple devices such as blindfolds and earplugs can cut off sight and hearing, while more complex devices such as the sensory deprivation tank can also cut off the senses of smell, touch, and taste. Short-term sessions of sensory deprivation are described as relaxing and similar to meditation. However, more extended sessions can result in hallucinations and effects very similar to the psychedelic experience. Flotation therapy has been widely advertised as a form of alternative medicine, though that has been met with a bit of controversy as some say the claims are exaggerated and poorly recorded. Despite the somewhat lack of scientific support, people have sought treatment from isolation tanks for many conditions, including muscle tension, chronic pain, hypertension, stress, arthritis, and even things like PMS. A rather new form of therapy, and some say psychedelic experience, is highly intriguing for many people. But where did it come from? Who created it and why? And are the claims of its therapeutic use really that exaggerated? Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it. Subscribe if you aren't already. Smoke something, drink something, and let's get into the history and truth of the sensory deprivation tank. The value of sensory deprivation has been known and thus sought out by many cultures for years, but the first actual device to do so was not developed until 1954. John C Lilly set out to create an environment in which he could conduct scientific research on the brain and explore its electrical activity. He was seeking to answer questions which had evaded him thus far in the several decades of his prior research. After concluding that he could go no further in his research of the correspondence between brain and mind without harming or changing the brain, Lilly began seeking answers in a different realm: the brain's consciousness. In particular, he was curious about what was required for the brain to remain in a conscious state. At the time, science had two contrasting theories on this matter. The first was that the brain required external stimulus to remain conscious. If the brain was not stimulated, sleep would occur. The second theory maintained that the brain cells contain their own automatic rhythms, meaning that consciousness was governed from within the brain and did not require outside stimulus to be sustained. To study this conundrum, Lilly decided to conduct an experiment in which he would restrict the brain from external stimuli. The experiment was set up at the National Institutes of Mental Health lab in the Virgin Islands. The first sensory deprivation tank was merely a slightly modified tank-like device originally built for World War II to test the metabolism of members of the Navy who spent time underwater. In this original design, you were suspended upright in the standing position in 160 gallons of water, with everything but your head completely submerged. What was known as a blackout mask, similar to the ones pictured here, supplied you with air and blocked any light from reaching your eyes. The first human experiments were performed by Lilly and his associate J. Shirley. They concluded that the brain did not need external stimuli to stay conscious, and instead relied on its own internal systems. Finding their sensory deprivation experiences relaxing and restorative, rather than what many had assumed would be stressful, they had great motivation to continue exploring the therapy. The scientific community of the time did not embrace his discoveries, but Lilly continued his flotation experiments. Realizing that with the use of enough salt in the water he could float while lying flat, Lilly created his next tank to suit this approach. Once his design was perfected, he installed tanks into his home and invited many influential characters to experience their first taste of flotation therapy. As word spread and more demographics discovered flotation therapy's benefits, floating gained momentum and grew in popularity. In 1981, there were about $4 million in sales and rentals in the industry, and expectations were that the market would grow. With the release of a major motion picture entitled Altered States, it looked like isolation tanks were on the rise. Though that expectation was never truly met until recent years, thanks to tank enthusiasts and pioneers like this guy.
Oh, no freezing.
No, Mr. Simpson. This is a sensory deprivation tank. It blocks out all the external distractions that bombard our souls.
Can you pee in it?
I'll take 2 hours.
Me too.
You're about to take a journey into the mind. You may see and experience things that are strange and frightening. But remember, they can't physically harm you, though they may destroy you mentally.
Oh, bud. Ting, tang, walla, bing, bang. Walla, bing, bang.
Okay, wrong guy. I meant this guy.
That's the real meditation. That's meditation advanced. If you want a vacation from life and an ability to step back and really look at yourself, yeah, you could sit in the corner and you could just do it that way. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. There's nothing wrong with going out on a hill and sitting and just overlooking a beautiful field and taking in nature and meditating in that way. That's a meditation in and of itself. Sure. It's almost like an energy absorption. Like you're taking like some power off the battery, like you're feeding it. You're feeding off of it. But the float tank is where it's at, man. And those fucking things are exploding now. People are realizing it now for the first time in decades, how important those things are. There was this big story that I printed the other day about the basketball team, the Golden State Warriors. They use it every week.
Makes sense.
Dude, the fucking biggest one in the world just opened up in Pasadena.
Yeah, just float.
Float Lab just opened up one in Westwood. They opened up a big location in Westwood. They're exploding now. They're everywhere. They're over the world.
Yeah, people love it.
They're finally getting it. People are finally getting it. This thing is like the best way to have a vacation from your thoughts, or to be alone with them, rather. Have a vacation from your body, I should say.
It's great because you're peeling away all the goddamn stimulus.
All the bullshit.
John C. Lilly claimed that the sensory deprivation tank allowed him to make contact with creatures from other dimensions and civilizations far more advanced than our own. He would forever refer to his very first encounter with entities from another dimension as the first conference of three beings. Lilly's, however, is an experience that others who use the tank have rarely reported. Most people who use the tank report a positive experience, but there are some who won't even consider it due to the confined space, period. Maybe this is the reason why the isolation tank has not become as popular as once expected. Or maybe it's truly an underrated means of expanding consciousness and opening one's mind to a world not usually there. If there's a message to take home from all of this, it's that sensory deprivation tanks are something of a mixed bag. It can offer anything from a means to achieving relaxation and reflection, to a vehicle that can aid you in your travels through time and space. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments down below. Have you ever been in a sensory deprivation tank? Was it anything like Lilly reported? And why do you think it didn't become as popular as many thought it would be? Please check out audible484.com to help support the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget about our Patreon, where you can get behind the scenes videos, early releases of new videos, and much more for as little as only $1 a month. You guys are amazing. I can't thank you enough. Smoke something, drink something, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.